let's talk about the impact that immigration is having on the U.S. economy and the jobs market. The U.S. adding 272,000 jobs in the month of May. Those recent job gains coinciding with a huge pickup that we're seeing in immigration. Now, to put this in perspective, immigrants now make up over 18% of the U.S. workforce. Now, this comes as there has been this battle playing out inside D.C. about how exactly to address immigration issues. In April, the number of encounters at the southern border remained near its highs of 180,000. So let's talk about what this means for the U.S. labor market. For that, we want to bring in Wendy Edelberg, the Hamilton Project Director and Brookings Institution Senior Fellow in Economic Studies. Wendy, it's great to have you here. So first, let's just take a step back. And I think if you could lay out for us just the impact that immigrants are having on the U.S. workforce right now, and ultimately the impact that that is having on the economy.
Thanks for having me. So to understand today's labor market, you have to understand what's happening with immigration. The surge in immigration has radically changed the labor market numbers that we're seeing. So think about it this way. Before the pandemic, and in fact, really before the Congressional Budget Office did the hard work to figure out really what was happening with immigration in the past couple of years, we thought that immigration would be running in 2022, 2023, 2024, about 1 million people. So that is to say, CBO thought that immigration in 22 and 23 would be about 2 million in total. Instead, they now estimate it was about 5.5 million people in total. That's a very large difference. And what that means is that the labor supply has been growing much faster than we anticipated. And, you know, if you're an economist who's been looking at the labor market all this time, you probably thought in the back of your mind that a stable payroll employment number that didn't have inflationary pressure in it might be something like 75,000 a month. Maybe if you were super optimistic, you thought it was like 120,000 a month. Now, given this surge in immigration, a stable employment number is more like 200,000 a month. So basically take whatever you thought you understood about the labor market before and double it. And what that means is that today's number is still super strong, but it's not like wildly off the charts, unprecedentedly strong. It makes a lot more sense once you understand what's been happening to labor supply.
And Wendy, we got an executive order this week on immigration. It's likely that there perhaps isn't much effect that's going to have. I mean, many who were discussing it and really looking through it were saying it might be the essence of a nothing burger because of the fact that you still have so much that still needs to be done on a policy perspective here that's really going to require both sides of the aisle coming together. What is the net effect as it relates to employment, though?
So it depends what your frame of reference is. So first, let's step back a second and say that this executive order will likely be challenged in the courts. So that would certainly make it a nothing burger if the courts strike it down. If it is implemented exactly as written, my sense is that it would reduce the number of asylum seekers coming into the country who are allowed to work here legally after a certain number of months. It would reduce that by 1/3. So that's not nothing, but that's not a completely different labor market. But where I definitely want to temper expectations, and where you're right to be cautious about thinking about the fact, you know, how much this executive order is going to affect the economy, where I really want to temper expectations is what it will do to the economy in the very near term. What we're going to be seeing in the labor market over the next month, over the next 4 or 5 months is very much determined by what's been happening to immigration since 2022. There's a lot of labor supply growth still in train. So even if the executive order is implemented exactly as written over the next handful of months, we're not going to see a big effect on the aggregate U.S. economy.
When you talk about the responsibility here of immigrants enabling the U.S. to avoid a recession, is that in fact true, just given the fact of how strong the U.S. labor market has remained, the fact that the labor market remains very tight, the fact that, yes, wages have increased, but maybe not at the pace that they maybe would have if you didn't have the population, the immigration population as we do today? I guess put that in context for us.
Yeah, there are two interesting points of comparison here. So one is taking the labor market that we saw in 22, 23, the first half of 2024, and trying to understand it with and without immigration. If you try to understand it without understanding the surge in immigration, you're going to look at that labor market and say it is wildly hot, and monetary policy has a lot more to do to get the labor market on stable footing to make sure inflation comes back down to its target. That's one really important point of comparison. The other point of comparison that I think you more have in mind is what the economy would have looked like without an immigration surge. That's an interesting question. It's less important for monetary policymakers right now, because of course we did have a surge in immigration, but nonetheless, it's interesting to talk about. And in that regard, the surge in immigration in 22, 23, first half of 24, serendipitously happened at the same time that we saw a surge in labor demand from firms as the economy was reopening. So remarkably, the economy has been able to absorb this surge in immigrants. If we think narrowly about what's happening in the aggregate labor market, it's been able to absorb this surge in immigrants without a whole lot of disruption. The labor market has expanded in terms of supply, and at the same time, we've seen an increase in labor demand that's been able to hire all these people. The labor market is very strong, both for foreign-born workers and for native-born workers.
Wendy, we only got about 45 seconds left here, but as it relates to the states and small businesses specifically that are looking for labor right now and are saying that there are shortages right now in labor, what states could actually benefit most from immigration as that is an input into the labor situation?
So I think what we're seeing is that the labor market is probably expanding just where the immigrants are coming in. So remarkably, that actually seems to be shaking itself out pretty well. We're seeing stronger employment gains where the immigrants are going. And in fact, the Hamilton Project just did an analysis of where we're seeing the surge in immigration go state by state. What's really important there is to think about the fiscal effects on those state governments and the local governments. That's really where the local issues are.
Wendy Edelberg, who is the Hamilton Project Director and Brookings Institute Senior Fellow in Economic Studies. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.